Hello, and welcome to today's live SBA web conference. Please note that all participant lines will be muted for the duration of this event. You are welcome to submit written questions during the presentation, and Deborah Crumity will repeat the questions that come in for the benefit of the entire group. To send a note, please select the Participants menu at the top of your screen and opt to send note to all presenters. If you are logged in using the web-based application, please use the Notes function on the lower right-hand side of your screen and address your note to all moderators. In addition, to adjust the presentation view on your screen on the participant application, click on the Fit to Whiteboard icon located on the lower left-hand section of your screen. If you are connected via the web-based application, you can adjust the presentation view by simultaneously clicking the Control and the plus or minus button on your keyboard. If you require technical assistance, please send a note to the ATT CES operator or call our help desk at 888-796-6118. I would now like to formally begin today's conference and turn the call over to Valerie Coleman. Valerie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Carla, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our June edition of our SBA First Wednesday on Size and Affiliation. As Carla said, I'm Valerie Coleman, and I'm going to be your host today. Jan Kaiser is taking a well-deserved vacation this week, and Deborah, of course, as Carla said, is on the line to do our questions. So we're trying to keep it to about 40 minutes when we do the presentation, to leave the last 10 minutes for questions. If you can go through this, I don't need to read that. For the technical issues, I will be doing page numbers as we go through to make sure that you are on the same page as our speaker. We do have some quick references at the end of the presentation that deal with databases, FAR references, things of that nature. We always put that at the end for you all to use, and so we hope that at the very end you will go through that, and that's a good thing to download and keep as a desk guide for you. And then we do have more training for SBA, and we've given you the website there where you can go to that. We do want to give a shout out to our PTACs, our Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. They do keep past programs if you were not able to listen in on one, and giving you that website and how the PTACs partner with federal agencies, and then their general website if you'd like to find the PTAC closest to you. This is the rest of our schedule. You can see we have 2 more after this, and on the next month we've added a new topic. Our speaker, unfortunately, was not able to come in July, so we did a new one on consolidation and bundling, which we've gotten a lot of questions about. We will end with the 8A Business Development Program in August. We do not have a session in September. We will start back up in October. And as you can see at the top, right now we're at 9:30 to 10:30 Central Standard Time. Remember, due to the survey that you all completed, starting in October we will be at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time in the afternoon. So we will be reverting over to afternoon sessions starting October 1st. You do get 1 CLP on this, and in the PowerPoint you will see this messed up. You will see the certificate. You do not need to let us know that you listened in. All you need to do when we get done is insert your name where it says that and download the certificate for you to enter into whatever system that you are using to count your CLPs. If you are phoning in, you can download it and put everyone's name in there. Please remember, we do have a learning box. Let me go back to that so you can see that. Down here, SBA Learning at sba.gov, where we can take questions if you don't get your question answered at the end of this presentation. If you want to be added to the database, if your email address changes, if you just have general questions, we really hope that you'll use that. So again, here's your certificate that you can download. Our speaker today is someone I've known for a long time. We won't go into how long Stephanie and I have known each other, but in my opinion, she's probably the best size person that SBA has in the whole country. She's excellent what she does, and I know that you'll get a lot of great information. So I'd like to turn it now over to Stephanie Lewis, who is a size specialist and also a commercial market rep with the Office of Government Contracting out of Fort Worth, Texas. Stephanie?
Good morning, everyone. As Val said, my name is Stephanie Lewis. I'm a size specialist here. I cover the states that are in Area 6, and we'll go into that in a little bit. My email address, too, is not on this slide, but I'd like for you to have it if you ever come across any size or affiliation questions or you receive a size protest and you're not quite sure what to do with it. You can always contact me. Email is the best way to contact me, and it's stephanie.lewis@sba.gov. Right now we're on slide 8, and we'll move into slide 9. So as I was putting together this presentation, I was thinking about why is size important to contracting officers, federal agencies, contract specialists, and I came across a variety of reasons that you may be interested in size. I know that you get a lot of questions on a recurring basis as to what is a small business, and it's important to always remember that size is a self-certification program. So companies that want to do business with the federal government self-certify in SAM their size status, and what they normally input is their revenue and employee information, and then the SAM software calculates their size for each NAICS code and puts it in a table that's easily readable for you to determine whether the company is small or large. But other areas that I think that are important for contracting officers to know whether companies are small or not is, of course, in the small business set-aside arena. When you're making your rule of 2 decisions, like, do I have 2 or more small businesses that can compete in this, size becomes an issue. Also, in our program certification areas at SBA, the 8A and Hub Zone program, companies must be small to participate in those programs. It's also important to know when recertification is required on your procurements and whether those companies, upon recertification, turn out to be large or small. Also, I know that you probably receive questions from coworkers during evaluation proposals when they're reading offers. They may have questions like, this company seems to be owned by a large business. Can it still be small? Or this company seems like another company is doing all the work. Can they still be considered small? Also, when you have contract clauses, certain contract clauses have to be in contracts when companies are small, limitations on subcontracting. Also, the non-manufacturers rule will apply under a small business set-aside. And then we have subcontracting plans. Small businesses are exempt from subcontracting plans, but the whole purpose is that they subcontract to small businesses. So you may get a lot of questions in that arena as well. So this presentation will go over each of those areas. What is a small business? It's going to include the non-manufacturers rule. What are affiliates? That's going to touch on joint ventures and our mentor-protege programs. And then we have size protests, what to do if you receive one or if you want to question and offer a size yourself. Next slide. Okay, let's get started. Size.
We're on slide 11.
We just talked about most of these areas here, so we can just progress to the next slide.
Slide 12.
What is a small business? We're going to go over the basics of how does a company determine whether it's small or not. First of all, it must be organized for profit. Any company that is a nonprofit is automatically considered what we call other than small. We have 2 categories, small business and then other than small business. So, of course, only eligible small businesses are able to bid on small business set-asides. And if you are a nonprofit, you are not eligible for small business set-asides. You must have a place of business in the United States that operates primarily in the United States or makes a significant contribution to the U.S. economy. You cannot exceed the small business size standard. Each federal procurement is assigned an NAICS code. We call that a NAICS code. And then each NAICS code has a small business size standard. A company must be small under that standard in order to participate as a small business. And then we do want to let you know that wholesale and retail codes are not to be used in federal procurement. So when you're selecting NAICS codes for your contracts, please do not select one that's a wholesale or retail NAICS code. If you're procuring a supply, you should look into the manufacturing NAICS codes and use those for your procurement. Next slide.
Slide 13.
When you go to our website, www.sba.gov, you can click on a link called Size. and you can find a variety of information. One that's very important is the NAICS size table, and it looks like this. It has these major two-digit sector at the top, and then it has the 6-digit NAICS codes that you use on your procurements with a little description, and then it has the size standard on the right-hand side. In this illustration, these are all revenue-based size standards. There's another column that's one more to the right, which is employee-based size standards. So NAICS codes have either a revenue or an employee-based size standard, not both. It's important to recognize that a firm can be small for some NAICS codes and large for others. So that's why we have small businesses certify for a specific NAICS code on a procurement, whether they're small or large for that procurement specifically. Next slide.
14.
NAICS codes are created by the Department of Census, not the SBA. And so you can go to the Department of Census website when you're determining what an appropriate NAICS code is. The Department of Census website will have a description for each, and you can do a keyword search as well. So that's a very helpful link to use to determine the appropriate NAICS code, especially if you have found a NAICS code that is appropriate, but it seems to be a wholesale NAICS code. That website can help you find the appropriate manufacturing NAICS code to put on your procurement. You should be using the NAICS code that best describes the principal purpose of the product or service being acquired. Don't use a NAICS code for which the company that you think you want to win the procurement is going to end up being small. That's not the appropriate way to select a NAICS code. You can look at 13 CFR 121.402, and it provides you some guidance on how to select the appropriate NAICS code. It asks you to consider which component accounts for the greatest percentage of the contract value, which product or service is described in the solicitation, what's the relative value and importance of the components in the procurement making up the end item, and what is the function of the goods and services. So it asks for you to take a totality of the circumstances as to what you're procuring and then determine what the appropriate NAICS code is. Each procurement should be assigned one NAICS code unless you're having separately priced claims or something like that, and that's the only instance where you could have separately awarded contracts that have different NAICS codes. But if you're only going to award one contract or you're going to award a contract to multiple offerers, you should only have one NAICS code on the procurement. Like I said, NAICS code is determined by the Department of Census. Okay, yes, slide 15. And it's SBA that creates the small business size standard that match those NAICS codes. We reevaluate the small business size standards on a rolling basis every 5 years, and they're adjusted for inflation as well. The size standards that are posted on our website at www.sba.gov/size in that size table, those are always the latest updated size standards for the current regulations. So you can always rely upon those. So when you are putting a size standard in your solicitation, it's best not to go from what you know to be the size standard for that NAICS code, but to double check on our website in case we have done an update, which of course are posted in the Federal Register. And you can also find on that same web link under a tab called What's New. We talk about all the recent updates to our Federal Register for any new size standards. The Department of Census every 5 years reissues, adds, deletes, amends NAICS codes. We had one done in 2012, and that's what we're currently operating under, the 2012 NAICS codes. On January 1st of 2017, they issued new NAICS codes. We did not create matching size standards for those new NAICS codes until October 1st of 2017. So at the beginning of this fiscal year, in October, you will see that the new NAICS codes for 2017 have been added to our size table, and size standards for those have been created. Changes are going to apply only to new solicitations that are issued after October 1st. However, if you have a pending solicitation and you want to incorporate a new NAICS code or a modified size standard, you would have to modify your solicitation prior to offers, excuse me. Next slide.
16.
SBA sets forth how to calculate whether you're small or not, and they've kept it really simple through the years on purpose so that it is not a complicated procedure and it's readily visible to a small business to determine whether they meet the size standard or not. For the average annual receipts, the revenue-based size standards, they're going to use their federal tax returns. They're going to use 2 rows on that, cost of goods sold plus total income, and that is their revenue for the year. And then they're going to average that for the last 3 completed fiscal years. So if we have a company that has a balloon year, a lot of revenue in 1 year, such as a company that was involved in Hurricane Katrina and got a lot of work that year, but its 2 years prior to that were not as good, it's not penalized for the work it received its most recently completed years because it can average it out over the last 3 years, and that is what keeps some companies small when they've had balloon years. For a number of employees, that's going to be all individuals employed by the firm on a full-time, part-time, or other basis, and it's done on a 12 calendar month basis, and it's an average over the last 12 completed months and the number of employees in each pay period. Next slide.
17.
There are some exclusions from revenue and employees. They do not count inter-affiliate revenue, and there are some amounts that can be excluded from revenue, and those are all outlined in 13 CFR 121.104, and it's a very limited list, and those are the only exclusions. One of which is amounts collected for another, such as a travel agent. That's one of the illustrations, but there's like 4 or 5 limited exclusions from revenue, and there is no more. Also, when a company has an affiliate, they must include the revenue or employees of the affiliate in their calculations.
18.
Like we said at the onset of the presentation, a contracting officer shall accept self-certification unless there's a reason to question the firm's size self-certification. In SAM, most agencies are using SAM for representation of size. SAM must be updated every 12 months to remain active. It's effective as of the date they submit their offer. When you are looking in SAM for a company's size status, the SAM website does have a way that you can look at prior dates. And so if you have a procurement that was offers were submitted 2 years ago, you can go back and adjust those dates and see what that company's size was as of that date. Because when we determine size, we use the date that the company submitted its initial offer, including price. And so when the company's in there annually updating their size self-certifications, your view is going to be the latest, but you may need a prior view if you have a procurement that was a little older. So you may need to do those adjustments to make sure that they were small as of the date they submitted their offer. And then also in SAM, I wanted to mention that when you look at the SAM table, a company may appear 4, 5, 6 NAICS codes in the SAM table. However, SAM does allow you to look at their size for all NAICS codes. Just because you don't see your NAICS code that you've assigned to your procurement in the table does not mean that they have not self-certified for the procurement as small. There's a little link at the bottom of the table that says See More, and if you click on that, you can look up at their size for every NAICS code in the table. Next slide.
19.
On a small business set-aside, we have something called the non-manufacturer's rule. So on a small business set-aside, the offeror must either be the manufacturer and comply with the limitations on subcontracting clause, or it must meet the requirements of the non-manufacturer's rule. And this is one of the reasons that we require you to use a manufacturing NAICS code in a supply-based procurement. Next slide.
20.
The non-manufacturer's rule says that if the contract is over $150,000, and the company is not the manufacturer of the end item, then the offeror must have less than 500 employees. It must be primarily engaged in the retail or wholesale trade and normally sell the type of item being supplied. It must take ownership or possession of the item with its own personnel, equipment, or facilities in a manner that's consistent with industry practice, and it must supply the end item of a small business or a manufacturer made inside the United States, or there's a waiver. We get a lot of size protests on this rule for supply-based procurements, and most of them center around the fact that they think that the item is not being manufactured ultimately by a small business. They're passing on the good of a product made by a large business. And so we do receive protests on this, and this is the analysis that what we will go through, these 4 steps and the conditions that a company who has been on a small business set-aside has to meet. The waiver at the end is one of 2 things. We have something called class waivers, which are pre-approved product, a list of pre-approved products for which SBA has found that there's no small business manufacturers that. So in these cases, we're going to allow a large business to produce this product and the small business to pass it on to the government. Those are listed on our website, and it's called the class waiver list. When you use those waivers, you have to have the product service code and the NAICS code and the description all has to be a match. You can't just solely use the NAICS code and assume that every product in that NAICS code has a waiver. All 3 of those things have to be a match. It's a very specific list. And then we have something called an individual waiver, whereby contracting officers, if they feel that there are no small business manufacturers, can request an individual waiver for their specific procurement. So they would request that prior to issuing the solicitation. They request it from SBA, and we take a look at their rationale and determine whether we want to issue an individual waiver for the procurement. And once that waiver is issued, then the contracting officer announces that that waiver exists in the solicitation so that all offerers are aware that they don't have to have a small business manufacturer. It's a little bit of a complicated rule, and if you ever have questions on it, you can always feel free to call your SBA size specialist. Let's talk a little bit about affiliation. So we went through size, it's revenue or employee base, but it's going to include the company plus all of its affiliates. And this is where a lot of companies get into trouble and where we receive a lot of protests, because people have differing opinions on what an affiliate is, so let's just talk about what our regulations consider to be an affiliate. We have 2 types of affiliation. We have general affiliation, means it's like a long-standing, ongoing affiliation, like you have a parent company, you have a sister company. Those are general affiliations. You're always affiliated. You always aggregate your revenue or employees with your ongoing general affiliations. And then we have affiliation for a specific procurement. That means you're affiliated with a company just in that instance on that procurement that you've submitted a bid on. Those are joint ventures. You've come together to submit an offer on a specific procurement, so we consider that you're affiliated for the procurement only. It's not a long-standing affiliation unless, well, we'll go into that later. But it applies only to the contract at hand.
23.
The key to size, the key to affiliation is always control. Concerns are affiliated if one concern has the power to control the other. It doesn't mean that the control is exerted. It means that they have the power to control the other company. When a company is calculating their size, they always include all of their affiliates, including their foreign affiliates. It's fine for a company that is located in the United States, doing business in the United States, to have a foreign affiliate. That is fine. A company that says that we have separate divisions, we have separate case codes, we have separate tax returns, we've organized ourselves independently by incorporating separately, has no bearing on affiliation. We always look at control. All of those things that I just mentioned don't dissolve control. When a company has the power to control another, we consider them affiliates. Next slide.
24.
These are just a couple of our regulations that talk about affiliation. Companies that have common ownership are affiliated. Companies that are commonly managed are affiliates. And then we have something called the identity of interest rule. This means companies that have a substantially similar business interests are affiliated with one another. And we've designated those groups to be immediate family members, people who have a pattern of common investments, and companies that are dependent through contractual relationships. So we get several protests on this, and the identity of interest rule is a lot of places where we find that small businesses don't understand. There's an automatic assumption of affiliation between immediate family members. So if I own a business and my brother owns a business, we are assumed to be affiliated through that familial connection. That is a rebuttable connection if there's a clear fracture between the two parties. But people with immediate family members should be aggregating those businesses unless there's a clear fracture that they can support and document in the case of a protest. People have a pattern of common investments, like me and a close friend of mine, we invest in my company, I invest in her company, we invest in a third company together, and we invest in a fourth company together. That is a pattern of common investing, and so because we have established this pattern, we would aggregate those businesses, including our own. And then we have dependents through contractual relationships. If a company derives 70% or more of its revenue from another source, we consider that it is economically dependent on that source for revenue. So we would consider that to be an affiliate. And then we have joint ventures, which we'll get into in a little bit.
25.
So, for instance, if I own fully an ice cream parlor in Chicago and I own 50% of a furniture manufacturing plant in Paraguay and 75% of a machine shop in Algeria, all of these companies are affiliated with one another. Why? Because I have the power to control all of them. 50% or more of a company's stock is automatic power to control. So since I own 50% or more of all of these companies, I have the ability to control them. So when I'm self-representing my ice cream parlor as a small business, I have aggregated the revenue of all the other companies in that. Even if none of these companies have any business with each other or any connection with each other, the connection is me. I'm the owner. Next slide.
26.
Okay, let's move on from size and affiliation to joint ventures and prime subcontracting relationships.
27.
So a lot of times we'll see something called a teaming agreement. And so a teaming agreement is neither a joint venture or a prime sub relationship. We don't know what a teaming agreement is. So we would really encourage you, offers when they submit proposals to call it what it is. Is it a joint venture agreement or is it a subcontracting agreement? Because when they use the word teaming agreement, it can fit into either of those categories. And then under a challenge, SBA is going to determine whether it is a prime sub relationship or joint venture relationship. So we really encourage offerers, and in your counseling of small businesses and in your solicitations, we would encourage you to encourage the offerers to make it clear what type of arrangement this is, because the size of the company is handled differently for each. A prime sub relationship is, of course, when a prime contractor agrees with one or more companies to have them act as subcontractors. Very clear. Normally a subcontract arrangement. Next
28.
slide. And then a joint venture is the coming together of two or more parties for the purpose of performing the contract at hand. It has an organized, specific, and limited purpose. A joint venture must be bid in the joint venture's name, and it must be in writing, and the joint venture must be registered in SAM. A joint venture cannot be populated with contract performing employees. So when a joint venture bids on a contract, it could have one or two administrative employees that run the joint venture, but the work has to be performed by the joint venture members. When we're determining size under a joint venture, under a new rule that became effective June 30th of 2016, each joint venture member must qualify as small under the NAICS code assigned to the procurement. So we no longer aggregate the revenue or employees of all joint venture partners. Now, as of June 30th of last year, the company can be considered small if each joint venture is small for the NAICS code. So this allows companies that are small to come together to bid on a procurement and not be penalized for their aggregated size. So here we have Small Business 1, whose revenue is $7 million, and Small Business 2, whose revenue is $4 million, and the size standard for the procurement is $10 million. Together, the company's aggregate revenue is $11 million. So under our old regulations, they would not be permitted to submit an offer on a small business set-aside. But under our new regulations, which we've relaxed a little bit to encourage teaming and joint venturing from small businesses, we now look at their size individually. So on now this procurement, small business 1 is small under the procurement, and small business 2 is small under the procurement. So this company may joint venture and submit an offer as a small business on the procurement.
Slide 29.
We have two types of mentor-protege programs now. We have the 8A mentor-protege program, and then we have the all small business program. So we're going to talk on this slide about the 8A mentor-protege program. And when companies have an approved 8A mentor-protege agreement, and then they form a joint venture under that agreement and bid on a federal procurement, when we're determining size, we look at only the size of the 8A protege. We do not look at the size of the mentor. But under an 8A procurement, the joint venture agreement has to be approved by our SBA 8A division. They must have written SBA approval before they submit the offer, meaning the mentor protege agreement must be in place and approved before they submit their offer. And the joint venture agreement has to be approved before contract award. That's on an 8A contract. On a non-8A contract, SBA does not review the joint venture agreement. Next slide.
Slide 30.
Then we have the all small business mentor protege program. It works very similar to the 8A one. When there is an approved SBA mentor protege agreement and 2 or more firms form a joint venture under that agreement and bid on a federal procurement, we consider only the size of the protege when considering whether the joint venture is large or small for the procurement. Again, SBA must approve this mentor protege agreement before offer.
31.
Sometimes we have a prime contractor that submits an offer in its own name, but it has a significant subcontractor, what we call an ostensible subcontractor. An ostensible subcontractor is something that we treat as a joint venture. It means that the subcontractor has, in layman's terms, too big of a role in this procurement to be considered a subcontractor. And the litmus test we use is that if the subcontractor is performing the primary vital requirements of the contract, or the prime contractor is unduly reliant upon the subcontractor, then we find that it's an ostensible subcontracting relationship. The subcontractor has too big of a role in this contract, and this is really a joint venture at heart. So we call this a de facto joint venture, and we treat it as a joint venture when we find that this instance occurs. We have quite a few size protests dealing with ostensible subcontracting. We also have some contracting officers, while reading proposals, realize that the subcontractor has too large of a role, or that there's dependence, or that the prime contractor is not performing the primary vital requirements of the contract. So we'll get contracting officer size protests asking us to look at whether this is an ostensible subcontractor and should be treated as a joint venture and not a prime contractor relationship. Next slide. Okay, so we've covered size and affiliations and joint ventures and mentor protege. Now we're going to talk about what happens if you receive a size protest.
33.
So if you should receive a size protest from an unsuccessful offer, or from anyone as a matter of fact, they should all be sent to SBA. Contracting officers and agencies do not have the authority to decide a size protest, to ignore a size protest, to solicit more information for a size protest, to advise the protester to modify or change or resubmit the protest. You should simply just receive the size protest and then forward it on to SBA. Our regulations have a list of other documents that we need along with that referral. The FAR guides that all size protests have to be filed with the contracting officer, and then the contracting officer forwards them to SBA. And then we keep all 3 parties in the loop as we process the size determination. The protests will go to the SBA area offices, not our district office or our regional office, but our area offices. And on the next slide, Val, we have a listing of who our area offices are. Val said I was the best size specialist in the country, but that's not true, because we have great size specialists in all 6 of our areas. And Val, maybe it's slide 35. We could go to that one for a minute.
All right, we're on 35 now. And that was just my opinion that you're the best.
I know. So here you can see where to send your size protest should you receive one, or if you want to lodge a contracting officer size protest, where you should send that. So you send it to the individual that covers the state where the protested concern is located. So the company that's in question, you look at where they're located, and then you send it to the appropriate person that covers that state. So I'm fifth down there. I cover from Arkansas to South Dakota. So any company that's protested in those states would come to me. It's good to contact the size specialist before you send on the protest. Some of them don't receive them electronically because of the sheer volume of a size protest, being that some protests can be hundreds of documents, hundreds of pages, and a lot of times solicitations are very lengthy as well. So some area offices only receive them via mail. And so it's good to check in to let the size specialist know that, this protest is coming. How would you like for us to send it? And do you have a checklist of items that you would like? And so they can get right back to you on those things.
You may go back to 34?
Please.
Okay, 34.
When you notify unsuccessful offers of the apparent successful offer, we ask that you then wait 5 days before making the award. That's the amount of time that other offerers have to protest the size of the company that's in line for award. So we ask that you wait those 5 days before making your award. So if you want to go to slide 36.
36.
So once you receive a size protest, then we ask that you do not make award of the contract for at least 15 business days, because that's how long we have to process the size determination, unless we get an extension from you. You do have the option to make award if it is must be made in order to protect the public interest. And so you would document that is the case and then make award. And if you choose to do that, the results, the outcome of our size decision, you have to count the award as. So if you've chosen that it's urgent and you need to make award, you cannot wait for our size determination and you make the award, and the company ultimately turns out to be an other than small business, you have to count that as an other than small business award. And you can also make award if we do not get our size determination done on time. Same type of thing applies. If it's urgent, you can make award, but please document the file as to what happened. Size protests cannot be used to vet potential awardees. A lot of times during contract evaluations, a contracting officer will call and say, I'd like a size determination done because I don't think this company, one of these offerers, is small. We don't do it at that point in time. Our regulations require that we can only do size determinations on the apparent successful offerer. So you must notify unsuccessful offerers who the apparent successful offerer is, and then you can make size protests. We do not use them for vetting. Also, they have to be done in conjunction with a particular or a pending procurement. We just don't do them in general. SBA has no secret database of small businesses. We just use SAM. It's a self-certification database. Sometimes you'll see a little notation in SAM, which is in the NAICS code table, and it has an asterisk by it. And underneath it will say that SBA has previously found this company to be other than small. If you find that notation, we ask that you contact the appropriate SBA office from my previous slide and have a discussion with that office about that company's size determination and whether it's other than small status would apply to their procurement. Companies who have been found large are not able to self-certify as small until we recertify them. So companies that try to represent themselves as small even without pursuing recertification, we need to catch those companies and make sure that they're not miscertifying. Also, contracting officers can make size determination or can protest the size of a firm at any time. They just can't do it before notification to unsuccessful offerers. Next slide.
38.
The protest has to be what we call timely and specific, meaning after the first date that the company learned who the apparent successful offerer was, whether that's your notice of unsuccessful offers or in a public bid opening for IFBs, it would be that day that bids are opened. They have 5 working days to protest the size of the apparent successful offerer. If they don't receive a debrief until several days after that, that doesn't matter. Debrief dates have nothing to do with the date that you're allowed to protest size. We always go back to when you first learned of the identity of the apparent successful offer, whether that was a Fed Biz Ops announcement or a written notification or a public bid opening. That is the date that we use to calculate the beginning of this date. It also must be specific, meaning it has to have specific detailed evidence to support the allegation that the offer may not be small. A lot of this is website information. It's difficult for small businesses to get their hands on specific information. A lot of them use contracting websites that detail contract awards, and then they total those and say this amount of awards indicates this company would not be small. A lot of them use news releases or the company's own website where they boast about their size as evidence. And so all of that is specific enough. What we can't have is just a company saying, I don't think this company is small, with no rationale. If a contracting officer receives a protest that is late or is not specific, you still can't just dismiss it. You still forward the protest over to us, and then SBA will quickly dismiss that protest as not having any standing.
39.
Okay, looks like we have about 7 more minutes, and we just have a few more slides, so we look like we're right on time. Once we receive a size protest that is timely and specific, we provide the company 3 days to respond with their information, and then in total we have 15 working days to render our determination, assuming there's no extension. All extensions are coordinated with the contracting officer because we know that we're delaying your procurement, so if we're going to extend it beyond 15 days, we want your permission that that's okay. A copy of the final size determination is sent to the protester, the protested concern, and the contracting officer. In very limited instances, some of the information may be redacted on the copy that is sent to the protestor.
40.
It's important to realize the date that size is determined because companies, sometimes contract award is not made for a significant time period after offers are due. So it's important to realize that size is determined as of the date an offer submits its initial offer that includes price. So if we had an offer that was due on February 14th of 2016 last year, and we're just now getting award ready and protest in, we use that February 14th of 2016 date to calculate our size, which means we use their 2015, 14, and 13 revenue to determine whether they're small or not. So sometimes a company may currently be large, but they're still eligible award because of the dates that are at play. A company that becomes large after it has self-certified is still considered small for the life of the contract unless recertification is required. In recertification, size is determined as of the date the concern recertifies its size. Next slide. These are the instances where recertification is needed after. So basically, size is determined as of the date of initial offer, including price, and that is good for the life of the contract, unless one of these 3 instances occur. If there's a novation, if there's a merger or acquisition without a novation, or this is a long-term contract over 5 years, including options, which includes multiple award schedules, multiple award contracts, and GWACs, then they must recertify their size when any of those instances happen. Also, in a long-term contract, a contractor must recertify its size at the end of the 5th year and every option that comes after that as well. So if a company's size changes because of one of those instances, then you must convert to counting it as an other than small business award from that point forward.
42.
A company that's found other than small is prohibited from self-certifying as small on any procurement with the same or lower size standard until it is recertified by the SBA office that made the determination. It also must notify all contracting officers for which it has pending procurement that it's been found other than small. It also must amend its size status in SAM and any other database unless it was a contract-specific determination, which would only usually be for an ostensible subcontracting finding. Next slide.
43.
Once our size determination is issued, all parties do have appeal rights. They can appeal it to the SBA Office of Hearings and Appeals. The contracting officer can also appeal. They have 15 calendar days to appeal it after they receive the formal size determination. And then the OHA judge issues an appeal decision within 60 calendar days after they close the record. The decision is either going to be that they affirm the size determination, which means they uphold it and it stands. They reverse the size determination, meaning they reverse it, or they remand it back to the area office, meaning we missed an element and so we have to reissue the size determination. Next slide. Super.
All right.
Size experts.
All right. Well, Stephanie, that was great. Thank you so much. And Deborah, I heard a lot of dings, so I know we have a lot of questions for Stephanie. If you want to go ahead and start with those, please.
Yes, Val, we do have quite a few questions for Stephanie. Stephanie, I'll start off with, there was a pre-award question, and they used a reference of 52.212-1 and 219-28. And the question is, when a small business is the apparent winner up for solicitation, what is the reasonable amount of time to allow them to self-certify for the applicable NAICS code to the solicitation?
Okay, so when an offer submits its offer, it is also self-certifying its size status as of that date. And so a lot of agencies use SAM, and so they'll go to the SAM table and look at what that company is classified as of that date, and that is their size self-representation unless you've requested paper written reps and certifications for that procurement for whatever reason. So it's not like they have a certain amount of time to do it. It already should be in the SAM as of the date they place their offer. Now, like I said, remember that the NAICS code table that's in SAM is their primary NAICS codes. If you don't see the NAICS code listed there, it doesn't mean that they have not self-certified for that NAICS code. You click on the See More link, and that shows you a table of all of their size standards. So when a company submits its offer, you should use SAM to determine whether it's, or validate whether it's small for that and has self-represented as small in SAM, and then you can move on from there.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. The next question is regarding GSA Federal Supply Award. And the question is, can COs around the sizes listed on the GSA library site, or is there another verification that needs to take place?
Can you repeat it again?
This is the GSA FSS Award. And the question is, can contracting officers rely on the sizes listed on the GSA e-library site, or is there another verification that needs to take place?
Okay, so on federal supply schedules, companies that submit an offer to be on the schedule self-certify their size as of the date that they're getting on the schedule. So I would have to assume then that GSA has correctly coded those on the e-library. So the contracting officers then should be able to rely upon what GSA has coded them on at. However, on multiple award type contract vehicles, contracting officers have the option of asking companies to recertify their size status for a specific offer if they choose to. So here a contracting officer has two options. If it's going to exercise a contract under the federal supply schedule, it can rely upon the size that's in e-library for that company, or it can ask offerers to recertify their size status for the particular order. So a contracting officer in that instance has an option of doing either.
Okay, thank you. The next question, there are multiple questions about joint venture, So I'll try to consolidate them all into about 5 questions. The first question is affiliation different than mentoring? How does a mentor-protege program fit into affiliation?
Affiliation and mentoring are 2 different things. Affiliation is generally common ownership, common control, common management, things like that. Mentoring is different. Because a mentoring relationship exists does not mean that a company has control. Mentoring, a formal mentoring, is through a mentor-protege relationship, and that is the most clear type of arrangement because it's a documented agreement that's been approved by SBA as a formal mentoring arrangement and what each party is going to benefit and give under that arrangement. But other mentoring occurs informally as well. So we would have to, if there is no formal mentor-protege agreement, we have to look at what type of mentoring is going on and whether that rises to the level of affiliation, which it would have to be heavy mentoring to be an affiliate. Mentoring as in we're providing the bonding. Mentoring as in we're running the contract for the company, that kind of thing.
Okay. The next question is, populated small business JVs, joint ventures, they're always ineligible to receive a contract award, even when the combined size of the JV and the 2 entities that comprise the JV is under the size standard for the NAICS code for the procurement. Is that true?
I'm sorry, can you read that again?
Okay, the question stated, are populated small business joint ventures always ineligible to receive a contract award even when the combined size of the JV and the 2 entities that comprise the JV is under the size standards for the NAICS code for the procurement? That was a long one.
Okay, so this rule is that the current rule, which exists after January 30th of 2016, is when a company submits a joint venture, its size is determined by whether the individual joint venture partners are small or not. If they are individually small under the NAICS code and the size standard assigned to the procurement, then the joint venture is considered small. If it's a procurement that was solicited prior to June 30th of 2016, we would aggregate the size of the joint venture partners to determine whether they're small or not. However, if the contract is over $10 million, if it's an employee-based size standard, it gets really complicated at this point because the old regulations require that the procurement has to be a certain dollar value to allow for the size exemption. And so I would probably prefer to go into that offline rather than confuse everyone because the new rule just says they're small if they're individually small. So if that person would rather email me, we can talk about the old rule. It's a much more complicated rule.
Okay. Okay, Stephanie, also on slide 28, there was a statement, joint venture cannot be populated with contracted filament employees. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, that's a brand new regulation. And joint ventures can only be populated with 1 or 2 administrative employees. We cannot have the joint venture itself, like employees hired under the joint venture name performing the contract, because then we can't see which employee is doing the work. And so the joint venture itself can have 1 or 2 administrative employees, but the work must be performed by the joint venture partners under the joint venture partners' names.
Okay, and also staying on slide 28, would you use the SAM record for each company rather than the SAM record for the JV as your small business verification?
No, if a company submits an offer as a joint venture, you'd have to look at their size representation for the joint venture in SAM.
Okay. Continuing on with joint ventures, if SBA does not approve the non-8A JV, how can an agency determine if the joint venture is small for the procurement?
Well, you would just take it at face value at that point. So in a non-8A procurement, SBA does not approve the joint venture agreement, but you as the contracting officer have the authority to request the joint venture, and you could take a look at it, and if you feel as though it is not meeting the required elements of the joint venture as outlined in 13 CFR, you could submit a contracting officer size protest, or you can take it at face value that it meets the requirements.
Okay. The next question is, can you confirm that if a company's registration in SAM includes answering yes to being owned by another firm, then size determination will always be based on worldwide information?
Yes. When a company is indicating its size in SAM, it has to include its affiliations, and so its SAM profile should be representative of that.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. The next question is regarding the non-manufacturing rules. Can you shed some light on the applicability of the non-manufacturing rules to subcontracts and what size standard to use, the actual listed size standard versus the 500 listed in the wholesale retail guidance for the non-manufacturing rules?
So the non-manufacturer's rule applies in any type of small business set-aside that's over $150,000, and the offer is not the end item manufacturer. If those circumstances exist, then they have to comply with the non-manufacturer's rule and the 4 elements under that. The offer itself has to have less than 500 employees, and the end item manufacturer cannot exceed the small business size standard for the procurement. I think
okay.
That if it didn't, just email me.
I think so. The next question deals with construction, small business set-aside. The question is 85% performance by the subcontractor, be it large or small, considered ostensible by default?
Well, not necessarily in construction because, a general construction company only has to do 15% of the contract. So if the prime is doing 15% of the work, we haven't really, it's not violating the limitations on subcontracting rule, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's ostensible subcontracting. Normally in a general construction job, the prime contractor is doing construction management, and then it has subs, which can do up to 85% of the work. That is not a high alert situation. That's a normal contracting practice. And in specialty construction, it's 25% that the prime has to do. So in construction, there are a lot of trades that have to be subcontracted because they specialize in different areas, and that doesn't necessarily mean ostensible subcontracting is going on. But if you have a company like a small business that's bid on something, and then their sub underneath them is, let's say, CH2M Hill, a large business out of Colorado, and it seems like CH2M Hill is really in charge of the contract, and it's not like subcontractors are doing their work. It's more like CH2M Hill is running the contract. Then that would be an ostensible subcontracting arrangement.
Okay. The next question is referencing slide 34. It states as 5-day waiting period on slide 34, reference part 15. Okay. Does this apply across the board, for example, for every acquisition, or only when part 15 procedures are being used?
Well, we would prefer that you always wait 5 days because 5 days is the window that they have to make a protest. So if you go ahead and make an award during the 5-day period, you're sort of putting your procurement in jeopardy that you may have to hold the contract off until we see if any protests are received. So it's preferred that you notify unsuccessful offers and then you wait 5 days. If you don't receive any protests within 5 working days, you're safe making the award.
Carla, how are we on time for additional questions?
We are at 10:30 Central. But if there are a few more questions, we can take some more.
Thank you.
I think we've answered the majority of the question. There were some other statements about the area offices on slide 33 and 35 that they weren't aware of SBA area offices, and that could be, if you want to send an email to the SBAlearning.gov, we could direct you to that. And also, there was a question about receiving copies of this presentation. If you would send an email to the SBAlearning.gov, I could send you a copy of the presentation. And I think that's all of the questions. I don't think there's any more. I think we captured everything.
Okay. Yes, and please remember SBA Learning at SBA.gov for additional questions that you may have for Stephanie. I'll be glad to forward those to her so that she can answer your questions directly. So if there are no more questions, Stephanie, thank you very much for your presentation. It was wonderful. Deborah, thank you for going through all the questions. We want to thank Carla for her wonderful expertise. We've been dealing with her for years with AT&T and getting this done. And I want to thank all of you for coming in. And please remember, next month we will have our presentation on consolidation versus bundling. I also want to remind you, if you have anyone in your office, if you were doing a group session in a conference room or something, and individuals want to be added to our mailing list so that they individually get the notifications of each of the first Wednesdays, send it to the SBA Learning at SBA.gov also, and we will add you to the mailing list for next month. So thank you all again. I hope you guys have a wonderful week and hope to have all of you back next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Conference. The session has now concluded, and you may disconnect.